we're going through a plan, you understand. We live through a script. And I noticed that even when I was very small, that we were living through a script. You cannot have these private organizations, private individuals with world meetings going on all the time, making their agendas, never being discussed in the political realms, and yet it's introduced by the political realms under different guises, and it all comes to pass. That's impossible otherwise. So you get to realize there's a group above politics that runs the whole show.
Here's an email from Eli. He says, I live in Israel, and I'm very confused. I have some non-politically correct questions.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Israel put on the side of the imperialists? My understanding is that the powers that be are actually trying to eliminate Israel, see the real story behind the assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, by inventing this non-historical people called the Palestinians. Looking forward to your comments.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's different aspects to all of this. Every group in the world will be used. And one of the best ways to be used, and the easiest ways to be used, is to really believe that you're a people. And we've found that done through history as they said, peoples against people, you see. You'll find as empires rise and fall, you always have the same people moving in to the empires to create the empires. These are the guys with the cash. It's a strange, until the money situation is solved, nothing will ever change. Power could never get to the people if they don't have command of the money-making system. And they don't, and they never have, and it's not intended that they ever shall. Now, Israel, if you go into the history of Israel, and I'm not talking about the present-day history. The present-day history of Israel has been rewritten. And many authors in Israel, and like Shlomo Sands, have written about lots to do with Jewish history, and the fallacies of it too. He's not the only one. There's lots of professors in Tel Aviv have written books about it as well. When the Zionists came in, the Zionist was a political movement, but it was also tied in with a world socialist and communist movement, completely tied in with it. It was also a messianic movement, because they used the old idea of Jews were to be a light to the world, etc., and show the people how to live. And of course they used it for warfare purposes in some countries instead. But the fact is, it caught the imagination of lots of people. And so they were set up in Israel, modern-day Israel. If you go into the writings of, say, there was Lieutenant Governor Storrs, Storrs. He was a Lieutenant Governor for Israel, or Palestine as they called it then, on behalf of Britain at the end of World War I, through the 20s and 30s. And he was in charge of setting up immigration. There was mass immigration long before World War II into Israel. In fact, from the 1800s, Rothschild in London was sponsoring early groups to come in from Russia mainly. But you find that in his memoirs, Mr. Storrs, he says, we have set up in the Middle East. Now, who is he talking on behalf of? We have set up. As a lieutenant governor for there, on behalf of England and the king. What do you mean we have set up in Palestine an Ulster? Now, Ulster is what they did in Ireland to create dissension down through the centuries, because Ulster would always be faithful to the British or the monarchical rule in a country where the native people, the Irish people, were going to be dominated by incomers who would be called lords, etc., who would use heavy force to keep the people in check. In other words, dominate the people, subjugate them. Same thing as Israel. Why would he say we have created an Ulster? You see? So they're very good at doing this, using different peoples to come in, create a base, give them a reality, and they have no idea there's a bigger purpose behind all of this. They have no idea at all.
And the purpose is?
The purpose is these guys work centuries in advance for their plans. And they knew, and Winston Churchill knew it because he talked about it in the early 1900s, about all of the whole region of the Arab countries, the Arabian countries, and even into Egypt too, But he said that eventually there'll be massive wars to take over these countries for the oil which is there, because he said the 20th century will be a century where oil will be in incredible demand. He even talked about later on he talked about northern Iraq would be a focal point for war as well, because of the vast oil fields, which they knew then were under the ground. Everything is known way ahead of time. And so the big boys who really own international corporations had to put something in the Middle East long before they were going to go in and bomb those. They needed bases. They needed an ally there, someone who would be on their side and who would profit from it too, to take over those countries. They also fed to a lot of the Israelis, again, the messianic policies of reestablishing an Israel from the all the way to the Euphrates. In other words, a greater Israel. In fact, the first prime minister they had in Israel talked about this. So they didn't want a little place called Palestine. They wanted a vast place from Egypt to the Euphrates. And that's where it's going today. So technically, people from Israel, some of them will be eventually put in charge of a lot of these ex-countries. This is part of the plan that's ongoing today.
And this control that Israel has over the United States, it's talked about? Mm-hmm. What is that about?
Well, there's no doubt at all about that. So if you look at some of the Israeli newspapers over the years, various prime ministers, I remember when Bill Clinton was in, and the prime minister there, another one says, don't worry about the U.S., we own it. You know, it's rather blatant. There's no guessing about how they put it across in their own newspapers. It's straightforward. So that's still a policy today. You know,
is there any real kind of split going on between the United States with Obama and what's his name, Netanyahu?
No.
That's all.
You understand that guys like Obama or any prime minister, I try not to even learn their names today because I realized long ago it was irrelevant.
Really low on the totem pole.
Yeah, in fact, again, Professor Carroll Quigley, who was all for this world system of socialism, a type of Fabian socialism and elitism, because the ones at the top believed they were the top of the Darwinian tree, you might say. And he believed that the intelligentsia should rule, etc. But he said that in the United States, he says there hasn't been, and this was the 1960s when he wrote his Tragedy and Hope, and his even better book, I think, was called The Anglo-American Establishment, where he goes into this in more detail. But he said there hasn't been a president in the United States for 60 years, over 60 years, that hasn't been appointed beforehand by our organization. He also said a prime minister as well for the other countries.
So it's much like they do in the Middle East, where they'll go in and maybe take over the Bank of Iraq, and when they invade them, and then they appoint their person to run the bank or run the country.
That's correct, yeah.
Same way.
It's the same way.
Same model they're trying to do in Syria,
exactly,
Libya.
Exactly. And you find too, though, that the front men are meant to take the rotten tomatoes. That's where they put them in.
What do you mean? Oh, you mean to take the hits from the people?
That's it. But you see, under democracy, we don't vote new people in. We vote the old guys out. We're so sick of them. That's how it works.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And so they're going from left. Let's go right wing this time, or let's go left wing. And the agenda. And Thomas Jefferson talked about this in his own writings. He says, when you see the same agenda going forth and continuing between changes in the House, meaning the Congress, know you're under tyranny, he said.
Wow. Thomas Jefferson wrote that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when you go into the League of Nations, then the United Nations, and all of the treaties that are being signed constantly, the IMF, the BIS, all run by one organization, the Royal Institute for International Affairs.
Yeah. And
set up by them. Then it makes sense, because no president or prime minister is going to cancel a treaty signed by the previous one on finances, or foreign aid, which goes to their own corporations, as you well know. in other countries, or any of these agendas. When a right-wing group comes in, they don't slash and cut back on the massive debt. They do a lot of bluster and fluster about it. It's a show for the public. But in other words, Quigley said, it doesn't matter. He says, we only need the ones at the top. We don't have to get all of the politicians in. We only need the ones in the top. He says, left-wing, right-wing. He says, we have communists, we have fascists, we have all kinds, he says, and they all do our bidding. So that's how it really is. So the front man is just that. The guys behind him are far more important than advisors.
So it's almost like Alan Watt. They let him do what he wants, even though he does dumb things, because then the people don't like him, and then they're just going to get all excited about getting the next party in the next time.
Yes. It's fantastic. See, we live in hope.
Yeah.
And we think, in 4 or 5 years we can get another guy. And this is how it goes on. And your whole life long you'll watch these changes, but nothing changes. It gets worse and worse and worse.
Uh-huh. Do you think the amount of people that maybe believe what you just said and the amount of people that believe what the masses believe, which side do you think is growing?
With the ones who believe.
You know what I'm saying? Say if you're correct with your analysis, that side, there's a group of people that say, I think I know he knows what he's talking about. That group, is that growing more than...
What's growing? There's a difference between understanding and being educated. Remember, education doesn't mean you're correct.
Right.
You can be educated in, say, the communist philosophy.
Right. Or whatever.
Or whatever, yeah. And so for those who believe they understand everything, they will not understand everything because this is a very clever system that was thought out an awful long time ago. And as I say, we're the most studied species on the planet. There's a big difference between reacting. See, most people react to what's happening in their own lives with finances, bank crashes, unemployment. Something's been driven home to them because it affects them personally. Other folk who are doing a little bit better financially and so on, they feel more secure, are also feeling a little bit nervous because maybe they're not so quite secure. So they'll always look into the financial side of the world, and that's what they follow, etc. Everyone follows the thing that they think is going to affect them the most. They don't understand the big picture. Now, you understand too, and I've gone over the history of some of this. Rockefeller, for instance, and a few of the top guys at the time, back in the 1930s, or actually late 20s, they got a group of guys together to find out, again, like the Rand Corporation idea, to study, a think tank, study how many newspapers would have to control to standardize public opinion on everything. And they came up with the ideal number for the United States. They also did their demographics for the different classes. They put out the Harper's Magazine, all the different types for these ones will be read by bureaucrats that'll work for us, etc., etc. So everyone's catered to with a form of the reality of the system. But they never gave up on that and said, well, that's it. They expanded and expanded and expanded to have massive chains of TV, radio, and newspapers, and it's all connected together by the same peoples. You standardize opinion and also standardize education system to fit the reality they're going to give you. It's really so precise as that, actually. So most folk, again, are in a false paradigm, but they don't know it because everyone else, when they bounce off their ideas, will bounce it back and say, yeah, I believe the same as you. So I must be sane. If all agree on the same things, we must be sane, you know. That's how simple it is to control vast... Plus, you'll notice there's not a generation has been given peace for hundreds of years. You're either being sent to war or you're having bank crashes. Bank crashes are standard for about twice a century. It's planned that way. If you go into the history, at least twice a century you get plundered by the banks, who never get punished for it. We pay them to plunder us. We bail them out. And they right after that they're giving themselves their big bonuses again and so on without a problem. No laws are written into it that change anything, and it's not meant to because they want to do it again. You see, when it's the time's right. Because impoverishing the public and increasing taxation, you pay off the debt, which they will lend you to pay them back with. I mean, it's just an incredible system. It keeps them, you see, that's the power. That's the amazing power of money, this strange abstract thing called money that's put in the hands of a private few.